Good evening. My name is Amy Jo Wittenberg. I serve as the Village President of Indian Head Park. I want to thank all of you for attending public meeting number 2 of the Wolf Road redesign project. We truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us on this cold and blustery evening. Tonight we will review the current status of the project and the design alternatives developed through a collaborative and inclusive process. What does this process really mean? Simply put, it's about bringing together stakeholders from across our community and beyond. Residents, school representatives, business owners, utility providers, experts in infrastructure, safety, and transportation work closely together alongside representatives from neighboring municipalities where Wolf Road extends into their boundaries. Through the framework of a Public Involvement Plan, PIP, and the Corridor Advisory Committee, CAC, we've ensured that input from affected areas has been considered in formulating the 3 design alternatives you will have a chance to review this evening. This collaboration is vital to shaping a solution that considers your needs and priorities. Your feedback will help us move closer to a final roadway alternative. Tonight's meeting will begin with a presentation by myself, Nate Roseberry from the Cook County Department of Highways, and Matt Gadziak from Strand Engineering that will last approximately 40 minutes. An open house exhibit review will be available in the back of the room. We have set up tables with all of the map alternatives for you to review until 9 p.m. Study team members from Indian Head Park, Cook County, and Strand Engineering will be on hand to answer questions and collect written feedback from attendees. In addition, members of the Indian Head Park Corridor Advisory Committee, including residents and business owners, will be present to answer questions and assist with the feedback process related to the design alternatives. To ensure all input is documented, feedback must be submitted in writing to be included in the study report. The post-meeting collection period ends on January 10th, 2025, and maps will be available to review in the Indian Head Park Village Hall boardroom during regular business hours. If you'd like to stop by to review these large roll maps, we'd love to see you. All written feedback will be available to the public on wolfroadstudy.com after compilation no later than 2/1/2025. All presentation materials, handouts, maps will be available tomorrow morning on wolfroadstudy.com. At tonight's meeting, we hope to accomplish the following items. We want to provide an overview of the study team, background, and goals. We want to review the project timeline and process for the redesign of Wolf Road, reviewing the public involvement strategy and the overview of the public feedback we have collected to date. We will introduce and review the preliminary alternatives. We will review the alternatives with you in this presentation, have large roll maps of each alternative for viewing after the meeting. We will identify next steps in this process and how we will collect feedback on the roadway alternatives. I'd like to take a few moments to provide some background on this study and briefly summarize what has transpired leading up to this evening. Recently, several residents have asked me, are the alternatives we reviewed several years ago still under consideration? Or are we starting over? To avoid any confusion, I want to clarify that we are presenting new alternatives this evening. The process for the Wolf Road redesign was reinitiated in fall 2023, supported by additional funding from Cook County. This funding has allowed us to undertake a more robust and comprehensive process, ensuring that the alternatives excuse me. We develop reflect the latest input, priorities, and technical considerations. Let me briefly summarize some of the prior activities for the Wolf Road project that can clarify how we got to this point. In March to November 2019, Indian Head Park initiated a feasibility study to evaluate the addition of a sidewalk or shared use path along Wolf Road, spanning its municipal limits from 72nd Street to Plainfield Road, funded by Cook County Department of Transportation through an Invest in Cook grant. The study concluded in November 2019, determining that such improvements would be better implemented in conjunction with other corridor-wide upgrades, such as a roadway and drainage enhancements. In September 2020, the Wolf Road Phase 1 study began, broadening its scope to evaluate a comprehensive corridor-wide improvements, including roadway, drainage, bridges, and safety updates. The study limits were expanded at this point to connect two county Department of Transportation routes. It extended the project area to include Wolf Road from 79th Street in Burr Ridge to Plainfield Road. In April 2022, you may have remembered the last time we were all together. The study team hosted Public Information Meeting number 1 in an open house format to present the preliminary roadway alternatives for a 5-lane and 3-lane alternative. In summer 2022, based on the volume and nature of the feedback received during this time, it became evident to the study team that a more robust public involvement process was required to proceed effectively. In fall 2022 to now present, Cook County provided an additional $350,000 in funding to enhance this public involvement process. These actions included developing a formal public involvement plan, launching the study website with the support of RM Chin, offering more opportunities for public feedback, including online surveys, an alternate mapping exercise conducted in 2023 and 2024. We also hosted 2 corridor advisory committee meetings with stakeholders on December 13th, 2023 and July 15th, 2024 to discuss roadway preferences and needs. Using the feedback collected through these efforts, the study team has revised the Wolf Road design alternatives to reflect stakeholder input and community priorities. All these alternatives will be available to review this evening. Indian Head Park is the lead agency and is working with Cook County, which has jurisdiction of Wolf Road, and is funding this study. Strand & Associates is the prime consultant engineer, and RM Chin is a subconsultant to Strand for a public involvement services. During the open house, you will have the opportunity to meet and discuss any questions you may have with representatives from each of these organizations. The study corridor is approximately 2.3 miles long, spanning from 79th Street to Plainfield Road. It encompasses the village of Indian Head Park, the village of Burr Ridge, city of Countryside, village of Willow Springs, and all in the township of Lyons. The southern section is the roadway section from the I-55 bridge to 79th Street in Indian Head Park, and also encompasses the Burr Ridge and Willow Springs municipalities. Reviewing this graphic, the existing road generally contains 2 12-foot wide lanes and 3-foot wide shoulders, but conditions vary along the corridor from 66 feet to 100 feet, which is the existing Cook County right-of-way across the roadway. The existing roadway width varies, but is mostly 60 feet. Open ditches collect and drain stormwater. The existing travel lanes plus shoulder are 30 feet. During the study, existing conditions were reviewed to identify deficiencies and opportunities for improvements in the roadway using data and information. We looked at roadway, structure, drainage, and traffic conditions, safety history, and multimodal conditions and connectivity. It is important to review the goals set by the study team and also mention the vision we have discussed for the roadway. We want to accommodate 2050 travel demands and improve operational efficiency of the roadway. We want to improve traffic safety and operations for all users. We want to evaluate connectivity and accommodations for pedestrians and bicycles. And we want reconstruction and updating of the roadway structures, intersections, drainage, and stormwater infrastructure following current up-to-date design standards. At the end of the presentation, Matt Gadziak will mention the shared vision for Wolf Road. I felt it was important to quickly mention this myself to you. This project is a once-in-a-generation investment in the Wolf Road corridor to enhance and upgrade infrastructure for long-term benefit. This project represents a $30 million investment in roadway upgrades, which does not include any additional landscaping, lighting, or hardscaping the village may want to include to beautify the roadway above and beyond what Cook County provides. The village is committed to enhancing corridor aesthetics consistent with the natural and wooded landscape of the community. We want this roadway to look aesthetically better than it does today, but also protecting our tree canopy and natural environment. Resident input will be actively sought to maintain the character of the community in any additional enhancements that are made. We are committed to evaluating safety and security upgrades using architectural fencing, lighting, or other elements in conjunction with potential village ordinance changes. Proactive planning and infrastructure improvements for water main and other utilities along Wolf Road as part of this roadway improvements are very important using available funding opportunities. The village is committed to safety of the roadway, evaluating truck enforcement and safety programs, speed limit changes, and ensuring pedestrian and bicycle safety across the corridor, and changes to our ordinances to support safety in the future. Thank you very much for your time this evening. I'd like to turn things over to Nate Roseberry from the Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways to take us through the project timeline and process overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Wittenberg. Really appreciate having us here today with the village. Really appreciate the partnership on this project. Projects like these don't happen without these vital partnerships between Cook County and the local community. Village of Indian Head Park is a great partner on this project, and we really appreciate this opportunity. Again, my name is Nate Roseberry. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of the Department of Transportation and Highways. On behalf of our Superintendent, Sis Killen, really happy to be here with you tonight. I'm going to give a little bit of the presentation. Thank you. Better? Way better. Okay. Didn't want to get too close to the mic, but obviously it wasn't close enough. So I'll start over. How about that? First and foremost, thank you, Mayor Wittenberg. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. My name's Nate Roseberry. I am Assistant Superintendent with the Department of Transportation and Highways. On behalf of Superintendent Sis Killen, really happy to be here with you tonight. I'm going to do a little bit in the middle of the presentation, talking through project timeline and overview, and then I'm going to hand it off to Matt to go through the details. So when we talk about project timeline and process, in the transportation realm, we break things into 3 phases: phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. We're currently in phase 1, and this is where we work on determining what the project will look like, the general, the number of travel lanes, whether or not we have sidewalk or multi-use paths, and the like. We work through the environmental reviews with our federal and state agencies, and we do public engagement. And that last part of it is vital. And that's why we really appreciate you all taking the time tonight to come out here with us. As the mayor mentioned, the phase one for this project started back in 2020, and with the reinvigoration in 2022-23 to expand that public engagement. Next phases would occur in phase two. That happens after this public engagement process comes to an end. And just to note, there will be another public meeting after this one to talk about further steps in phase one. We'll talk through the development of contract documents, get into the details of specifications and the like, and we bid it out to a contractor. And then during phase three is actually when the construction would occur. So what have we been up to in phase one? The mayor hit a lot of these notes, but just to kind of reiterate them, make sure they're crystal clear. Any phase one project, what do we do first? We review existing conditions. We look at the condition of the roadway, structures, drainage elements. Those have all led us to determine that reconstruction is really the next course of action for Wolf Road, so a full reconstruction of the roadway. We perform community outreach, and that is a really important part to it, and tonight is a great moment in that community outreach. We've been working with Community Advisory Committee, talking through some of the ideas along the corridor. Happy to share those alternatives with you tonight and get that additional feedback. As I mentioned, we conduct an environmental and historic analysis, so it's some of our regulatory requirements. We're looking to make this project federally aid eligible, make it eligible for a lot of grants that are out there for construction, making sure we check all those boxes to look at it from those perspectives. We coordinate with public agencies, so all of the agencies along the corridor, as well as any other that may use the corridor. We develop a range of potential alternatives that meet the corridor's needs. So that's where we looked at the existing conditions, we looked at traffic patterns, we looked at crash data, we looked at bike and ped needs in the corridor to try to come up with some ideas of how we might solve those, and then we want to share them with the public. We want to get that feedback, see if there's anything we missed, talk about any localized areas of focus for you all along the corridor. With that in hand, our plan would be to select a preferred alternative and refine the design and bring that back out for another public meeting. So just so you know, this meeting is to look at the three alternatives. We'll have another meeting in the future in 2025 to talk through those designs. And then we compile our report. So kind of put together a final report, put a bow on it, submit it to state and federal agencies for approval. So with these comments in hand, we'll be working with the Village of Indian Head Park to select a preferred alternative. The public input is vital to us, so that any public input you can provide tonight, and I think the mayor mentioned it, but written public comments are absolutely best. So if you can take the time to write those public comments, they're registered in our record, project record. We will be reviewing all of those comments in detail, and the comment period's open till January 10th. So if you have any comments in the future, let's say you leave here tonight and there's something you forgot to mention, don't worry, there's still time. If you know someone that wasn't able to attend tonight, still just fine. That's why we like to leave the comment period open for a while, so that'll be open into January to provide those comments. We understand with these types of projects, they're complex. There's trade-offs. We're going to do our best to balance all the input from the community, but I just want to lay it out there that sometimes it's not possible to have community consensus on the preferred alternative, but we're going to do our best to take that input in and make sure that we're balancing all the concerns and the needs along the corridor. So next steps are phase two. Like I said, we developed detailed construction drawings and contract documents for bidding. So this is, it's called plans, specifications, and estimates. Those are what we do from a public agency perspective, and then put those out for advertisement for a contractor to bid on it. A lot of the work that also happens in phase 2 is that detail work coordinating with public utilities and any private utilities along the corridor to make sure that that coordination happens correctly. We know with a reconstruction project, we're digging down into the base. With a closed drainage system, there's new storm sewer pipes. That requires that coordination of all those utilities that exist below the roadway. For a project like this, there is the need for some right-of-way acquisition, both looking at easements from a permanent perspective and a temporary perspective, so that would happen during phase 2. Matt's going to get into a little more details of what we're talking about with that in the project details. And then we obtain any regulatory permits. So anything that needs to happen from a regulatory perspective to build the project. And with that in hand, we move to construction to actually start building the project. With that, I will hand it over to Matt.
How was this? Good? Okay, so next up, I'm going to give an overview of the public involvement and some of the feedback that we have received to date. So as Mayor Wittenberg mentioned, we had the first public meeting for this project in 2022, and we collected a lot of data at that meeting. So in April and May 2022, surrounding the meeting, we had extensive feedback that was provided. And in response to that feedback, we, as a study team, realized that additional touch points with the community was needed to collect some more feedback to help us guide the project. So that's what we did. We established the public involvement plan, which laid out how we were going to interact with the community and stakeholders, and then also established the Corridor Advisory Committee, which included over 25 stakeholders representing a wide cross-section along the corridor, including school districts, park districts, residents, business owners, and other government agencies to collaborate with the study team. So when we got in 2023, once we got things restarted, there was a couple different survey methods that we put out as a study team. So we put out a questionnaire, and in that, 320 people responded. As you can see in the pie chart on the screen, the vast majority of respondents were living in Indian Head Park, but there were other communities that responded and showed interest in the process. Some of the top concerns that we heard from this survey was traffic and roadway conditions, bike and ped accommodations, safety, aesthetics, and others. Another way that we interacted with the community was with a interactive map. So there was a website link that people were able to go and put pins at specific locations and put a comment, and then other people could chime in saying, yes, I agree with this issue, or no, this comment or this pin is misrepresenting or is not what my experience is. So we were able to kind of see the specific locations that people had issues. If there was a crossing location that was desired by the community, they would be able to specify that on a map. Or if there was a drainage area that was a concern to a homeowner, we could see where that was specifically located on the map. Again, we have a pie chart on the screen showing some of the top areas that people had concerns about, with 40% of the comments talking about pedestrians in some capacity. Once we got to the first Corridor Advisory Committee meeting in December 2023, about this time last year, one of the kind of take-home activities that we had after that meeting, or that we discussed at the meeting and was kind of a take-home activity after, was a mapping activity that broke the corridor down into 3 distinct segments. The south segment was from 79th Street to 72nd Street. The middle segment was from 72nd Street to Joliet Road, and the north segment was from Joliet Road to Plainfield Road. And respondents were able to give feedback if they thought, a open ditch section would be better in one portion of the corridor versus a closed section with storm sewer and curb and gutter, or if there was locations that someone did not think an element such as a two-way left turn lane was needed, we could dial that in and kind of look at the segments distinctly to kind of tailor the needs of the community to the different areas. So what we heard is going to follow on the coming slides. So what we heard from the roadway characteristics side, on the stormwater management, and again, we collected feedback for the specific areas, but what we're showing on the maps here is just summarizing things together. So from the stormwater management side, corridor-wide, there was a strong support for a closed drainage system with curb and gutter and storm sewer underneath the roadway that collected and drained the stormwater away. For the two-way left turn lane, there was also support for the two-way left turn lane, although there was a little more nuance with some ideas that people had of where the two-way left turn lane could go versus maybe a dedicated turn lane. So we were able to kind of collect that feedback throughout the corridor. On the pedestrian and bike accommodations side of things. For sidewalk, there was very strong support for sidewalk to be included along the corridor, and with some of the feedback that we received, we were able to dial in, exactly where people thought sidewalk made sense, where it didn't make sense, and things of that nature. On the shared use path side, which the shared use path is a little bit wider because it accommodates both pedestrians and bicyclists. So there was mixed support with some people being in favor of the shared use path, some people being against it. So we took that as, this is something that the community does not have a strong or a consensus preference on. So that is an element that we are going to continue to evaluate in the process. For the on-street bike lanes, which would be another way to accommodate bicyclists along the corridor, we saw that there was strong opposition to those. So that was an element that we did not include in the further considerations. And one last just kind of statistic slide, which shows a lot of the different touch points that we as the study team have had with the community. Just some statistics: we've received 15 voicemails, I've had 40 contact list and newsletter signups, had over 3,000 postcards that were mailed out, 261 emails received, have had about 3,500 website views, and again, touching on some of the survey results. So all this to say is that we have had touch points with the community in several different ways to collect feedback, because we want to meet the community where they are to collect that feedback. We want to be kind of like a sponge, sucking up all of the feedback that the public has to give us, and we can kind of consider that and use that as a guide for what the corridor can look like in the future, which I'm going to get to in the coming slides. So next up, we're going to talk about the preliminary alternatives. So based on the feedback that we had received, the study team determined that there's one consistent roadway configuration that would be proposed across all of the alternatives. And that consists of a northbound travel lane, a southbound travel lane, and a two-way left turn lane between them, which the space would be used for dedicated left turns actually at the intersections. And that lane configuration would have curb and gutter with an underground storm sewer system to collect that storm water and drain it. And the area that we have some of the different alternatives has to do with the pedestrian and or bicycle accommodations. So when we get into the coming slides and after we conclude the presentation and kind of open things up to the open house portion, you will see that there are varying alternatives that have 5-foot wide sidewalk, 8-foot wide shared use path, all of that with a minimum 5-foot buffer between the roadway and the path or sidewalk. And that buffer is important because it has space that is used for snow storage when the streets are plowed, and it also just provides a comfort level for someone that is riding their bike or is walking along the roadway, that they don't feel like they are right on top of where the cars are driving. So first up, we're going to talk about the alternative one, which is the baseline sidewalk and is located in the center of the room behind us here. The map on the right side, I think, is the best descriptor of kind of what we are doing. So starting at the south part of the corridor and working north, so from 79th Street up to 72nd Street, there is going to be sidewalk on both sides of the road, and that is a combination of keeping some existing sidewalk and filling in gaps. So the locations of the orange on the screen and on the maps behind us, that is locations of existing sidewalk, and the pink is where there is proposed sidewalk that we are filling in some of the gaps. Between 72nd Street and Joliet Road, we are only proposing new sidewalk on the west side of the road. On the east side of the road, there is the entrance and exit ramps to the 294 tollway, and there is a golf course and a cemetery on the east side, which is a little bit of a sensitive property, so we are proposing sidewalk only on the west side in this area. And then north of Joliet Road up to Plainfield Road, on the west side, we have new sidewalk proposed all the way up to Plainfield Road. And then on the east side, we only have a little bit of a section of new sidewalk from where there is some existing sidewalk in front of the Ashbrook subdivision, connecting that to Acacia Drive, where there is existing sidewalk right now. So in total, the finished width it varies between 49 feet and 61 feet, and the 49 feet is if there's only sidewalk on the one side, the 61 feet is if there's sidewalk on the both sides. Next up, the second alternative, which we are calling the full sidewalk alternative, that is going to be to my left in the back of the room, your all's right, and it is pretty similar to the first alternative, but there is one difference highlighted, which is circled in blue on the map, and that is that the east side sidewalk is extended down to the Joliet Road intersection. And so that would provide accommodations on both the west and east sides for the north section of the corridor. But otherwise, it is the exact same as the first alternative. And then the third alternative that we have to share tonight is the shared use path alternative. Starting from the south and moving north, we have a new shared use path that is 8 feet wide, proposed on the west side of the road. That would go all the way up to the Joliet Road intersection, and then it would cross over with a marked crosswalk at the Joliet Road intersection and continue on the east side of the road all the way up to Plainfield Road. On the east side of the road, from the south segment at 79th Street, that again would be mostly existing sidewalk, but filling in some gaps with proposed sidewalk to get up to 72nd Street. And then north of Joliet Road, there would be proposed sidewalk on the west side of the road. So touching on the shared use path just a little bit longer, this shared use path is located on the east side of the road from Joliet to Plainfield for a couple of reasons. So data that we had collected from the LaGrange Highlands School District 106 showed that the majority of students attending the Highlands Elementary and Middle School live on the east side of the road and would use the shared use path to potentially get to school. In addition, there's also fewer driveways and entrances on the east side of Wolf Road, and that just reduces the number of conflict points between someone that would be riding their bike having to stop and cross an intersection, versus the west side of the road has more driveways and more intersections, which is potentially more conflict points. Okay, so next up, I'm going to give just a preview of what you all are going to see when you take a look at the alternative exhibits. So touching on a couple different items on the following slides. So with the alternatives and the exhibits that we have prepared, there is a legend on each of the sheets, and it has various colors and shapes and lines. So we encourage you to look at that so you can kind of see what those colors and shapes and lines actually mean for existing sidewalk versus proposed sidewalk versus existing right-of-way versus, the potential for proposed right-of-way. So please refer to those when you are looking at the maps. Touching on right-of-way specifically, which right-of-way is the area that the Cook County Department of Transportation and Highways that they already own. And it does vary along the corridor, as Mayor Wittenberg previously mentioned. At its narrowest point, it's 66 feet, which is 33 feet on each side of the road, generally like from the crown of the road or the center of the road. At its widest point, it's 100 feet, which would be 50 feet on each side of the road. Even with that, though, there's some locations like intersections, like is shown in the graphic on the screen. These potential improvements are not able to be fully constructed within the existing right-of-way. And after this meeting, once we decide on the preferred alternative, that's when we will go as a study team and actually refine the preferred alternative so that we can determine exactly where the land acquisition needs are at. So we will have that for the preferred alternative for the Corridor Advisory Committee number 3 and also for public meeting number 3. There is a little snip shown on the screen from the legend, which just shows the color of what are we calling existing right-of-way versus the potential proposed right-of-way versus any easement that is needed. And in the next slide, I'll talk about what does each of these terminologies mean. So for land acquisition, there are 3 types. The first type is fee simple, also known as right-of-way, and that is the acquisition of all rights and interests of that portion of property. The next is a permanent easement, which would be area that is covering the construction or installation of ancillary roadway features that are considered permanent. So if there is a drainage outlet or something of that nature that the county needs to get there not only for the construction, but for the long-term maintenance, there could be the need for a permanent easement so that the county can access that feature to continually maintain it. And then the last is temporary easement. And that is area that is essential to complete the project, but once construction is done, future entry is not needed, and it kind of goes back to the property owner in their ownership. So the ownership is retained by the property owner in that case, and it's used by Cook County for construction purposes only. It is very important to highlight that property owners are financially compensated for all types of land acquisition. And on the exhibits, we do have some of the lines shown, which are crayon or Sharpie level at this point, that just show which parcels we believe are going to be impacted. And we can confidently say as a study team that there will be no building impacts based on the acquisitions or easements or right-of-way that we need to acquire. So most of the time it is used for things like grading or to reconstruct a driveway to smooth things out. But then once we are done with construction, it's like it never happened, and it's back to the property owner maintaining full rights to it. So again, we have some of these lines drawn on the maps that, again, are Sharpie or crayon level, but we did think it was important to give the context of how do the different alternatives stack up for how many different parcels are impacted. So for the first alternative, the baseline sidewalk, right now we are identifying that there are 15 parcels that would have some sort of right-of-way acquisition. There are 0 that would need permanent acquisition or permanent easement, and 74 that need temporary easement. For the alternative 2, it's the same, that 15 are identified for right-of-way acquisition, 0 are identified for permanent easement, and 76 are identified for temporary easement. And then for the third alternative, that does jump up a little bit, that 26 parcels are impacted for right-of-way, 0 for permanent easement, and 76 for the temporary easements. And how this kind of fits in with the context of the overall corridor is that there are approximately 135 parcels along the corridor. The potential number of parcels impacted by land acquisition is subject to change as we continue to refine the limits of what's needed and area for this preferred alternative. And we are going to come back for the 3rd Corridor Advisory Committee meeting and the 3rd public meeting. And at that point, we will know exactly where these limits are, what's needed, and we do anticipate that this number of impacted parcels will go down, but we're trying to provide kind of a worst-case scenario at this point. So touching on tree impacts a little bit, because we know that this is a very important consideration for the project and for the community. So Cook County has a 1-to-1 tree replacement policy. So any trees that are greater than or equal to 6 inches in diameter that is removed by the project will be replaced within the corridor. But the Village of Indian Head Park, as Mayor Wittenberg mentioned earlier, they're committed to enhancing the landscaping along Wolf Road beyond just the standard Cook County replacement policy. And I know tonight we're probably going to get questions of, well, how many trees are being impacted and what is the difference between the different alternatives? But that's not something that we have an answer to at this point because there are several factors that go into it. It's not just where is the roadway or where is sidewalk versus shared use path. If you have a little bit wider path, does that mean more trees are going to be impacted? Or the same number of trees, that's something that is one component of it, but there are several other components that could involve tree removal and tree replacement. And that could be the underground utility construction, whether that is the village's utilities or other public or private utilities, whether that is gas, ComEd, Comcast, AT&T, all of these are elements that are located underground. And if we have to impact them with the construction because we are reconstructing down to the base. If those have to be moved, that's on the utility for them to relocate, and there could be additional trees that are impacted by their relocation. There's also stormwater infrastructure, elevation and grading changes, and then a very important element is if there's temporary pavement or anything like that that's needed to maintain traffic during construction. Because by only having 2 lanes during construction, if we are maintaining the 2 lanes in both directions, or 1 lane in both directions during construction, that would likely involve shifting the roadway over to one side, using some temporary elements like temporary pavement, so that the other side of the roadway could be reconstructed, and then in the next stage, traffic would shift over to the newly constructed pavement, so that the first stage could be reconstructed. So for all of these different elements and reasons, refined tree impacts can't be determined until phase 2. But as Amy Jo mentioned earlier in the evening and in the presentation, this is an opportunity for a once-in-a-generation investment in the corridor to enhance and upgrade infrastructure for long-term benefit by enhancing corridor aesthetics, evaluating safety and security upgrades, and proactively planning infrastructure improvements. And with that, I have a few more slides just to wrap things up before we set everyone loose to look at some of the exhibits. So touching on feedback quickly, feedback must be submitted in writing to be included in the study report, and this written feedback can be provided in several different formats. It can be provided on the comment cards that are available at the table over to my right. So they can be handed back to us tonight. They can be emailed to the info@wolfroadstudy.com email address. They can be dropped off at Indian Head Park Village Hall, or also mailed to the Wolf Road Study team at the address listed. So closing things down and setting the stage for some of these next steps. So as previously mentioned, we will be collecting public feedback until January 10th, 2025. At that point, we are going to take all the feedback that we've collected and review it as a study team and use that as the basis to select the preferred alternative. And then once we have that preferred alternative from early 2025 into early 2026, that's when we as a study team are going to get back in kind of the engineering nitty-gritty and refine that preferred alternative so that we can get to some of the specific answers that we've been asked to date that we just aren't at that stage of the process yet. And then we're anticipating in spring of 2026 to come back and have the third corridor advisory committee meeting and third public meeting, which would be the presentation of the preferred alternative and final impacts. And then the target is to complete the study by summer of 2026, and then pending the funding that's lined up and what the county has in mind for doing the phase 2 of the project, potentially the phase 2 could start at that point. So with that concludes the presentation for the evening. So we'd like to encourage everyone to get up out of the seat, mingle with the study team, take a look at the exhibits, and yeah, thank you all for coming tonight.